Hi everyone, I'm Alla. Welcome to Alla Young Paintings. I decided to do a real-time painting demonstration after that quick video, the 30-second, 40-second video I think that I uploaded a couple weeks ago. Got some great feedback on that, so I thought why not do a real-time slower version. So if you're interested, you can follow along or just watch for fun. The inspiration for today I got from a photo I found on Pinterest. This beautiful bird. Not sure what it's called, but maybe we'll look that up and I'll post that in the description of the video. So we'll be working on that. And I have my canvas here. I like to buy the canvases that are already wrapped and pre-gessoed, so there's nothing else I need to do. I can start painting right away. Moving on to the paints. Here's my palette today. Very simple colors. I have a green, yellow, orange, white, black, and then I have another white, another black down here on the palette for mixing purposes. Let's see, the green is Hooker's Green from Liquitex Basics. The yellow is just the primary yellow from the same brand. I have the cadmium orange hue, also from Liquitex Basics. And for my black and white paints, I like to buy them in a bigger package because they do get used so much. So here's an Artist's Loft Titanium White, a bigger bottle. And the black is the Galleria Acrylic Winsor Newton Mars Black. Then I have a cup full of just regular water. I do like to use sometimes the slow dry blending medium from Liquitex. And what this does is slows down the drying on the canvas of the paint to make acrylic paint behave more like oils, so you can have longer to mix the colors. But since I'm doing a real-time demonstration, I thought I should stick to the water, let it dry fast, so we could actually start and finish within about 20 minutes. Now for the paint brushes, I have this Filbert paint, which is a rounded, flatter brush. Then I have this is actually called the flat brush. It's a 1/4 inch. This is the one that probably gets used the most out of my entire collection of brushes, and I have quite a few of them, but that is my favorite. It's useful in all kinds of situations, and doing basic shapes, doing some detail work, as well as some broad strokes, but that's the one that's definitely gotten the most mileage. I also have this Deerfoot brush, which is, let's see if I can get a good, there we go. So you can tell it's a thicker brush and it's angled, and what this does is give great texture. So for something like a bird that has feathers, it's definitely a brush I like to keep handy. Then I have a sword brush, which is good for straight lines. See, it's tapered and really thin. Good for straight lines as well as wispy. In this case, we'll need it for the feathers up here and possibly for the eyelashes of the bird. And then for fine detail, I have this spotter, just an itty bitty brush. And as the name suggests, it's good for spots. So it'll be used around the eyes and the beak details of the bird. Okay, so we will start with the pencil. Actually, I forgot a pencil. I just have a Blick Studio number H pencil. It's important to have good tools if you're going to be painting. And what I like to do is just put on the basic shape of what I'm working on just to get the color blocking. I don't go into a lot of detail with pencil because we are going to layer on paint. But we'll just do a basic, do this side of the face down to the beak. Not sure if you can, how much you can see. Make it a little bit darker here. Down to the beak, and then the top of the head. Like again, just very, very basic shapes. This is where the nostrils are going to be, and then we'll do this one eyelid here, another one here. This is going to be the orange part, and then the body part here, and then this is where the feathers are going to be, and Okay, very, very basic shape. So now I can start to fill in the background with the green, and I'm going to use the filbert brush for that. Dip it in a little bit of water, and I always like to have paper towel handy and just kind of blot off the extra water or extra paint. Make a nice flat brush, and that way you don't over saturate. Okay, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna start with just the green, and then I'm gonna add yellow into it for some highlights. We'll start with just this crisscross motion. It's kind of a blurry background. We're not trying to make a grassy knoll or anything like that. Just this blurred background. It would really, what it does is just help to make the colors of the bird in front of it pop. So I'm not too worried about this being perfect, leaving the brush strokes visible. And then all these little white parts that you can see, I'm gonna fill in with a little bit of the yellow. So I'm gonna go in, I'm not gonna clean my brush off. It helps with the mixing. Just gonna add some yellow highlights, and it gives it some depth that way. So it's not just one flat color. And just kind of randomly placing darker and lighter wherever. As Bob Ross would say, this is your world, and you decide where things are going to live in it. And just deciding where I want to see some yellow highlights, where I want to keep it darker, trying to space them out a bit, and then I'm following this pencil outline. I'm trying to stick to that. And then I want to get that crosshatch, crisscross X marks back into these edges so that it doesn't, so you can't see my paintbrush stroke of going up straight up and down the edge. I'm going to go back through and add the crosshatch. A bit more green up here. A little yellow. I could also be using multiple different shades of green to make it even more dynamic, but I think with blending in the yellow, it's enough of a difference where it's not too monotonous with the color. If I were just using green alone, this would be a pretty boring background, but adding the texture as well as adding the yellow into it helps make it a little bit more interesting. I got a little paint here on the side of my canvas. I'm not too worried about it because I'm going to go around and do a single color around the edges, probably black, once I'm all done with it. That way, if this doesn't get framed, it still looks finished and it's ready to hang on a wall, even without a frame. So, almost done here with the background. A little bit of yellow here in the corner. Now, what is important to establish once you get into the actual subject of the painting is the light source, because you want to have consistent shadows. So you want to establish where the light is coming from. In this case, it's a bird and I've got green, so we're outside. So the light is going to be coming down from above. The sun is shining somewhere on this bird. You can tell by looking at the source material where those shadows are. And we'll take a look at that after I've established some of the blocked out colors here. What I'm doing now is just filling in, making sure I don't have any white spots so you can't see through to the canvas. That makes it look unfinished. I'll go back with a little bit more yellow in these spots and fill it in that way. Paintbrush gets to get a little dry, we're going to dip it in a little water and then dab it off on the paper towel so that it's not too wet, because what happens when your brush is too wet, the water will start to drip down and you'll get these stripes in the background, and that does not look good. Okay, add a little bit more yellow up here. Round out. There we go. That looks pretty good. Got some interesting colors happening. Okay. We're going to wash out the brush really, really well. Make sure to get all the green out of there, because what's next is the gray for the birds, for the main part of the head and the body. And then we'll go back in and fill in the white and the yellow of the beak, and then the orange of this beautiful, the eyes here. Unlock this real quick. Okay, so what we're going to do is go in with the gray here and here. So I'm going to take my white that I have here for mixing, take a little bit of black, not a lot because it's a very light gray, and just mix it in, and we'll go in there. The exact color of gray isn't super important right now because this is just the base color blocking layer. We'll go back in with more detail. And I try to paint in the direction of the feathers, because acrylic paint does, you can see through the layers usually, and don't want it to have horizontal stripes or something going across what should be this feathery, wispy looking bird head. Okay, now I've run out of the gray, but I have the color still on the bottom of my palette here, so I can match it with a little bit of black and a little bit of white, and yeah, we get pretty close. Go back in with that, and I'm being careful about the edges here because the green isn't quite dry yet, so I'm trying not to pick up any green on this brush as I get towards the edge. It's looking pretty good. As I mentioned, since we're using just water and not a medium that's going to slow down the drying, this is going to be possible to finish the whole painting in one session instead of working on a background, letting it dry overnight, coming back to it. Okay, now down here, it's actually a little bit more of a white area. So the light is actually coming from behind the bird in the source photo. So that's going to make it a little bit easier. There's not a lot of shadows to worry about, more just highlights kind of on the outside that glow through the feathers. Okay, so there's that glow. And then back to the gray. So I'm mixing a little bit more gray back on that same spot. And then fill in the rest of the bird. And it's a little bit darker here in front of the head because, again, the light is coming from behind the bird, so the body is creating its own shadow here for the front. A little bit of water. Getting a little dry. Okay. I must have swiped on my orange there. All right, what's nice about the white is that it covers up really, really well. It's a thicker paint. So whenever I need to layer anything or correct a mistake, the easiest way to do it is to add just flat white to the spot that needs correcting, and then go over the next color once the white is dry, because that white will cover just about anything. It might take a few layers if it's a darker spot that's being corrected, but that white is going to color. It's kind of like a primer on your walls when you're painting your walls. You got to put a primer on it. You can't just start painting over a blue wall with yellow paint. So that is what the white will do. Okay, I'm just going to add a little bit of texture and blend these two areas together. Like right here, I have a little bit of green peeking through. So I'm going to add my white. There we go. And I'm going to let that area dry, and then I'll come back in for more texture. Okay, so I've got that. Now we'll do the orange, and I'm going to move on to my favorite brush, the 1/4 inch flat brush. And pick up just a tiny bit of water. I'll go into my orange, and we'll just, like I said, block out the color here for the beautiful, beautiful eyes on this bird. She has better makeup, thanks to nature, than I ever will. The wrong kind of vlogger here, not a makeup artist, but this bird is beautiful. This is the closest I'll ever do to a makeup tutorial, is finishing up this bird's beautiful eyes. Go. Got the orange in there, and then down here the orange blends into a yellow. So gonna wash off, pick up some yellow. Actually, this yellow does not cover very well. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick up yellow over here, and I'm gonna add white to it. And it's only gonna make it a little bit lighter, but it's gonna make it cover a lot easier, a lot better than it would on its own. All right, so a little bit of yellow in here. Okay, so I've got the colors blocked out. Now there are 2 black nostrils that are gonna go right here, but I'm gonna wait until I'm done with all the feathers and all the blending for me to add those nostrils, because otherwise I'm just gonna end up painting over them. Okay, now we're gonna check and see if we're ready. So it's a little bit wet right here in the last part that I did, but all around here it's pretty dry. You see there's not a whole lot coming off. So I can add the feathers on the bird here. I'm going to use that flat brush again, wash off the orange and the yellow, and I'm going to go in with the white. Once again, I said if you want to cover anything, start with white, and then I can go back over it with the gray and the black if I need to. So it's kind of thicker. Thicker pieces of, I don't know what you call that, a crown? Looks like a Lady Liberty here. It's a little bit wet up there, so I'm picking up a little green, but not too bad, nothing we can't cover. There we go. beautiful bird. She's getting there. Okay, now we can add in a little bit of this darker gray. I'm gonna get the chunks. I'm getting the chunks off of my brush and keeping it nice and flat. Cover up this green that got picked up. You'll notice I'm probably not the most careful painter when I'm first starting out and adding colors to my work. And as I get closer to the finish, I pay attention more to detail. And I've just learned from experience not to worry about being so perfect right off the bat, because your painting is going to change so much before you're done with it that it's not worth the hassle going in with the details right away. It's just a waste of time. So I'm a little bit free with my brush and with details. Add in some of these black feathers sticking out. All right, my video cut out there for a second. I wanted to show you the reference photo and how it's starting to come together. See where the shapes are. So I was working on the feathers here above when it cut out, and I just need to plug this in so we can keep going. Okay, now we're going to start to add some more layers. I'm looking at, so with the feathers, I want to start with the feathers going to be on the bottom layer and then paint on top to the top. So in the picture, I can see the feathers, the feathers on the front are covering those above them. So we're going to start with the feathers on top and work our way down so that the brush strokes match what's happening with the bird. Okay, so we're going to do, it's pretty dark, kind of all the way around here. There's a little white spot. Just block it out. There's a little bit of a light spot right there. And then it gets lighter down here. And a light spot right there. Okay, and then everything else is kind of this darker gray. So we're gonna do, mix a darker gray. We're just following the way the feathers are going to grow out of this bird. And you can see when I don't add, it's a little, I didn't quite mix the gray and the white and the black totally together so that I could still have some black streaks, and that gives it some very easy automatic texture without having to go back in with extra layers of paint. Kind of does multiple layers at the same time when part of my brush is white and part of it is black. It gives it dimension, depth, and really nice texture. It's gonna look goofy here at first, but as we move along and add more rows of feathers, and I'm try not to make it into like a clean row, because that's not natural. But as we add rows of feathers. I'm going to make them a little bit lighter, a little bit darker as we go, so you can differentiate what's going on. And it'll start to look like it makes sense. So, see what I'm doing? Every once in a while I go back in and add a little bit more black, a little bit more white, mix it together, not fully, kind of keep it stripy so that it's not so monotonous. That's the right word, not monochromatic. That's what I'm looking for. It's not so monochromatic up on the canvas. You can see individual strokes. I mentioned there was a little bit of a white spot over here. I might have to go back in after I'm done with the rest of the feathers to make that spot a little lighter. Maybe I can figure it out as I go. Oh, I guess we can just add a little bit more white to this area as I go. There we go. Now I add the black back in. My palette turns into a big mess, as you can see. I always say if you're not covered in paint when you're done, then you did not enjoy yourself. My palette is covered in paint. My fingers will be covered in paint. My easel for sure will be covered in paint. Now this one's relatively clean because I don't use this one all the time. This isn't my main easel. This one is a floor easel, and I normally like to use a tabletop one, but that is my camera stand for the day. Don't have fancy camera equipment quite yet. So I'm using this easel and it looks pretty clean, which is unusual for me. And as I was setting up today, I didn't have my apron on. As you can see, the apron is covered, and I had a different shirt on, and right before I hit record, I noticed I had black and white paint all over my shirt before even starting to paint. So that is one piece of advice, if I could offer, is make sure you have an apron or a paint shirt, something that you're not in love with. Now, luckily acrylic paint does wash off if you get to it right away. So I was able to wash the white and black out, but if I hadn't noticed it and I continued to do the tutorial here and painted for 30 minutes, that would be a goner. That shirt would be a goner. Okay, now we get to the bottom part here where I want it to be lighter, so I washed off my brush, and I'm going to go in straight into the white because it's going to pick up the gray as I overlap here. It very easily picks up more gray. So I don't need to start with the gray here. I need to start with the white so I can lighten up this layer. This would be one instance where slow drying is good when you're mixing like this. Right after I'm done with this part here, with the lightning part, I need to layer on the orange and the yellow, which would be really hard to do with oil paint because these feathers, the gray and white feathers, are going to take a long time to dry if we're using oils. Now with acrylics, I can go up here and work on these feathers on top, which is what I've been doing, well, before I noticed that the video had cut out. So I can go up here and work on those a little bit, maybe come down here and work on the body. By the time I'm done, I'm ready to layer the orange without mixing it into the gray. So once again, acrylic is a good good way to do something fast if you want to finish a painting in one sitting. So this is why when you go to paint night in those Pinot's palette or one of those other places, they always use acrylics. You only have 2 hours to work and you got to get it done. Okay, so like I said, I was working on, oh, sorry about that. This thing is locking up. So I was working on the black feathers above. We'll do another reference shot here. So going up here, making those a little bit darker. And then next we're going to work on the feathers on the body. Do that next. Put this baby down. Plug it in. And then we'll keep going. There we go. Okay, so back to our flat brush, my favorite. You're seeing me probably using this more than anything else. Actually, for the body, since it is big, I will start with the bigger brush, the filbert, this one, and go in with the gray and do a couple, layer or two of the feathers with the filbert. And then we'll go in with my favorite brush and finish up the layers there. Now, as we looked at earlier, it's a little bit darker here around the face because of the shadow coming. The sun is behind the bird and the shadow is coming from the head. So we're going to make that a little bit darker. And I'm doing a very, very rough job here because I'm going to go in with the smaller brush and do the details. But just to start us out here, nice layers, white paint. Pay attention to the timer this time. Make sure that when the video does stop, I'm paying attention. There we go. Once again, I'm not mixing the gray very well. I'm keeping, if you can tell, see here, keeping the gray and the white. This is not, sorry about that. Keeping the paint gray and white and black not mixed together. That makes for some very interesting colors and an easier way to layer in more depth and more shadows. Okay, I need the lighter paint over here. So I'm going in with just, once again, just a fresh white paint. It'll mix in with the nearby grays very easily. And there's some lighter, wispy white in the photo here, right by the eye. We're going to do that. And we're doing this first because the orange is going to be in front of and on top of these neck feathers. Okay. Now we're going to move back to my favorite brush. I'm going to go in and do this shape of the beak a little bit more here. Kind of blends into, it goes up into this upside down heart shape into the yellow. A little bit longer there. Okay. Got the yellow. I'm going to have the nostrils right there. I'm just putting little dots right there so I know where they are so that the shape of the rest of the beak doesn't get lost. I'll fill in the details in a little bit. Okay, so then there's some lighter white here. I think this is the area where I'm going to use that deer foot. A little bit of yellow in the beak as well. I'm going to go in with that deer foot brush that I showed you earlier. That is great for texturing. So it's angled and it's round. So we're going to dab for texturing here on the beak, and I'm putting it into this white and yellow mix that I had before. And I'm going to dab right up here, close to the nostrils to give it some texture. And then we're going to dip into the gray and dab here. I decided I need to move a little bit closer to show more detail. Now that we're getting into the little details, you can see the face a little bit better. So what I did was finish dabbing on the beak. We did dabbed a little bit of the yellow up here and then the darker gray down here. And then there's this part on the beak that is glowing at the bottom, just right on this bottom edge is a really thin, see-through, kind of opalescent part of the beak. So what I've added first is the white, and then down to the corner and then up the side edge. And then we're going to add the yellow into that. And then I'm just picking up just straight up yellow because I'm okay with it not totally covering everything since it's on top of the white already. And that gives it this glowing in the sun look that we're going for. It's hard to see there. So what we need to add actually is some darker gray texture. I'm just mixing up a little bit more of the gray we've had, the same gray we've been using, and put that back into the beak. So it's a little bit darker actually than the gray we've been using. Ooh, hello black. And now, washed off that deer foot brush and I dabbed it dry on a paper towel. And now I'm going to blend. I'm going to use it to blend all this texture. Blend the black. And be careful not to overdo it with that glowing part because we still need to see that. And then I'm dabbing again for that beak texture. Okay. Now we're going to use this dabbing technique again with the yellow. And what I'm going to do is mix some more of that yellow with just a little bit, mixing yellow with just a little bit of white to help me get it to cover more. And I'm putting it on pretty thick on this brush. And we're going to dab it on because this is where the texture on this part of the beak is, think of like a chicken's skin without the feathers on it. The bumpy, the bumpy bird skin texture. So that's what we're going for here. I'm going to go beyond where my yellow stops into the orange because then we're going to overlap it and it'll look more natural than just having these harsh lines. So I'm washing off my deer foot. I'm going to dry it off on paper towel. Again, if you're not making a mess, you're not having a good time. dry it off on my towel, and then I'm going to pick up some orange. And then just kind of we'll dab it and work it in so that it goes on covers all the surfaces on the brush. And then we're going to overlap the yellow for this part. So overlapping, and we're blending in the yellow. And then I'm actually going to go down into the yellow a little bit to add more dimension, to kind of into the crevices, and I'm just dabbing very lightly. You can see, I can move closer here. See how I dabbed in a little bit to give it depth? Apologies, still figuring out this stand. Okay, to give it a little bit more depth. And if you overdo the orange, which I think I did a little bit here on the edge, just go back into it with more yellow. There we go. Okay, now the orange piece is actually feathers. So we're going to take the orange, and when I was dabbing, I noticed the orange is not covering that well. It didn't cover my pencil marks over here either, so I need to do my trick of adding some white. And then we're going to add the orange feathers into it. Now here, adding white has actually made it a little bit too light for my liking. Might have to go back in with a different yellow that I have to give it the right color. So we'll see how this works out after a layer. Yeah, this is more of a salmon color. That's not what we want. Okay, so we will use Proven Orange from Vermilion. I have this collection of small acrylic paints, and it's from Color Your Life. This one. We're going to go with a little bit of Vermilion, which is a darker orange, but we're going to mix it in to what we already have. Hopefully that'll get us the right. I mixed it right in here. That should even it out. Okay, so we're going to do the same technique here. We're going to start at the top, just like we did with the gray feathers. Start at the top and work our way down so that they are layered correctly. I think I'll go back in there actually with a little bit of a lighter orange from that collection. Color it's called. Just to give it some depth. Coming together though, looks pretty good. Getting close to the finish line here. I think the eyes are going to be vital and definitely a very important part of the puzzle here. Oh, that looks good. The eyes are going to be very important to get right. So here's from the same collection. This one is just orange, and I'll let that dry off a little bit and then go back in with the orange. I'm going to show you the difference. Hopefully you can see here. This vermilion is more closer to red, and then this is just the pure, here we go, the orange. So we'll go back in with, but this needs to dry a little bit more. So we're going to go back to the beak and add some straight lines here with the sword brush. I'm going back into the black. I'm going to add just a very, very thin layer here to help define it. I actually decided while I'm waiting for the eyes to dry, I'm going to work on some of these feathers up here. Some that are gray that end in white, and then you can see a little bit closer some wispy feathers back here that I can add to the painting. Here's what we have so far. So while I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm going to use the sword brush, a little bit of white, and we're going to add some of those wispies here. And we're going to add some of these gray pieces that end in a nice bright white. When you add some of this wispy white, you can kind of helps with that glowing from the back look that we're going for, where the sun is coming from behind and it's shining on these feathers, through the feathers. Add a little bit of that, a little bit of the white to the black ones, so you can kind of feel that glow. Now I might have to go back in with my flat brush and kind of blend the gray back. So I've gone in and added some wrinkles, as you can see, with this sword brush. I'm going to go back in with that orange and layer in just the orange to kind of make it blend a little bit more and have a consistent texture, so that both the orange and the brown that I used, which is the orange with a little bit of black added, but this way both the orange and the brown that I used have similar brush strokes, and it doesn't look like I just put on some stripes on top of feathers. So we're doing that here and putting some orange in between and some on top of the brown, making it more of a cohesive texture. Okay. I added a little bit of white to the orange again for more texture and to cover a little bit better. Unfortunately, this orange is pretty light. Now I got the darks and the lights and the peaks and valleys of these wrinkles. Not being super particular but where I put them, that looks a lot better. Last is the eyelashes. All right, while I was waiting for the eyes to dry so we can finish up the eyelashes, I used up the rest of my paint. I had quite a lot left over here. I was a little generous today. And I blocked out the colors for my next painting, which will be another butterfly. Can't remember for a second what it was called. Anyway, back to our birdie. Now all we have left to do is the eyelashes, and then I think that we are good to go. So we need our trusty sword brush. Get it nice and wet with the black, and then you need to flatten it out so that we don't have any chunks on it at all. I'm gonna go back to my picture here, and I'm gonna add the eyelashes to this beautiful bird. Start with the top here, and eyelashes are not perfect. They can overlap. Some are longer than others to make them look natural. They do not need to look like they are fake. That sounded really silly. To look natural, they shouldn't look like those fake glue-on lashes that you get when you get your makeup done. They can crisscross over each other and overlap, and some are shorter and some are longer. That's not by any means perfect. So that is what I'm trying to do here. And then kind of have to do a little upside down action on this one. This is quite a bit curvier on this side because it's sideways. I'm trying to keep them just as skinny as the other side. Look realistic. There's a little bit of a glow on this side, so I'm going to try to add a little tiny bit of white to some of these. And it's just going to look gray. But that's all we really need to show that we have the sun coming through behind these lashes. These lashes are in the dark, so we don't have quite that, but there's a little bit of white happening here along the edge of the eyelid. So we'll do that. And then I think there's a little bit of wispy white feathers coming out of the side of the face here. And then I think I will take a photo